Throughout the life of this YouTube channel, I've built numerous DIY NAS systems in desktop cases, whether by converting old office PCs or using cases with plenty of drive space. One strategy that I've also used, and constantly see recommended in the comments, is to utilize 5¼ bays by installing various adapters. This can be a useful way to add a lot more hard drives or SSDs by filling up 1, 2, or even 3 unused 5¼ bays. But what if you had 12? Well, stick around and maybe find out. Dealing with this case was a bit more difficult than I was expecting, but not nearly as difficult as trying to manage all of the software needs for a business. If that's a problem you're facing, you might want to check out the sponsor of today's video, Odoo. Odoo is an open source enterprise resource planning software suite, featuring over 45 user-friendly applications, making it suitable for even the largest of organizations. However, due to its modular design, it's also a great fit for small businesses. You can start with the core features you need and add more as your business expands. Whether you need CRM, inventory management, accounting, or project management, Odoo has you covered with a seamless integrated system. They even offer a website builder to help you easily create and customize your site. One of the best things about Odoo is its flexibility and cost effectiveness. You can self-host the Community Edition on premises for free, while the Enterprise Edition provides additional features and support at a great value. Plus, you can start with your first application for free for life. So if you only need one application, you can use it entirely free of charge. There's also a vast community of developers and users, ensuring you'll always have access to resources and advice. If you're looking to organize and streamline your organization or grow your small business effectively, be sure to check out Odoo. If you're interested, make sure to check out the link down in the description below, where you can get a free 15-day trial with no credit card needed. This is the Anidees AI Raider XL, and I'll cut them some slack on having AI in the name because, well, this case was released well before that became the buzzword of the month. It's a fairly unique case in that it has a ton, and I mean a ton, of 5¼ bays. Because of that, and the fact that various drive cages and adapters exist, I was curious if this could compete with the likes of the HL15 or some other cases with ample drive space, like for example these that I covered in a recent video. That might be a little bit tricky, at least in terms of value though, because, well, this thing costs a little over $300 at the time of writing. Now, don't click away just yet. I'm not completely out of touch. Trust me, I'm very much aware that $300 is extremely expensive for a case. Frankly, it's very unlikely that I would even have this if it wasn't for the fact that Anidees offered to send it over for a video that, well, I thought would at least be fun to make. Now, before I just start chucking stuff in this case, let's take a closer look. I mean, it has to cost $300 for a reason, right? Maybe upon closer inspection, that price tag is justified? Well, in most regards, no. While it is very large, it doesn't have a lot of the niceties you would come to expect from a case in this price class. One of the first things that bothered me were the side panels. They don't have captive screws, and there isn't a hinge or mechanism to help get the panels off. They just slide backwards and come off like any other cheaper case. I realize these are nitpicks, but I think it's fair to nitpick when you're paying this much money. There are some handy grommets and plastic covers for cable management on the inside of the case, but, well, I'm jumping ahead here a bit, but most of those rubber grommets just fell off. Also, for being such a large case, there really isn't a ton of room for cable management, but once again, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. It does at least have two 3½ bays, as well as three 2½ drive trays on the back, and also has tons of room for large eATX motherboards and massive modern GPUs. The case is made from fairly sturdy 1mm thick steel, which I found to be a bit of a double-edged sword, but more on that in a bit. And while it doesn't include any fans, it has room for way more than you could possibly need. But there still has to be some reason why this case costs so much, so I imagine it has to be the fact that this thing has something that, well, no other case that I know of does, which is those 12 5¼ bays. I mean, literally the entire front of the case is just 5¼ bays. I doubt most people in 2024 are looking to fill this up with CD, DVD, or even Blu-ray readers, so really it seems that the benefit here is that you could fill up the front of this massive case with various adapters to add a bunch of hard drives, SATA SSDs, or heck, I guess even NVMe SSDs. Considering something like the HL15 with its 15-drive backplane costs $800, if you could fill this case up with drive bays to allow for at least 15 drives without spending a ton of money on those adapters, well, this could arguably start to be a good value, at least in comparison. I had a couple of ideas on how to go about this. The first was actually to 3D print a bunch of adapters to fill this thing, which on one hand would mean you don't have a convenient backplane for easily hot swapping drives, but you could theoretically have room for even more drives than the HL15 while spending less money and, well, also ending up with a 3D printer in the end. The other idea was to use adapters that do have a backplane. The problem here is that something like these from IcyDock get really expensive, to the point where just buying 3 of these to get 15 drives would mean you end up spending, well, basically the same amount of money as if you just bought an HL15. But what if you could find a less expensive option, like, well, this little guy I got from AliExpress. These fit 5 3.5-inch drives in the space of just 3 5.25-inch bays. The drives go on these caddies that slide back into a SATA backplane. They also include an 80mm fan on the back to provide airflow to keep the drives cool. Since they take up 3 5.25-inch bays, my thought was that you could get 4 of these, filling the entire front of the case to give you room for up to 20 drives. And since these only cost around $60, you would still end up spending around $250 or so less than if you bought an HL15, while still having a hot swappable backplane, as well as room for 5 more drives. This all sounded good in theory, but not so much in practice. That's because I ran into the first major pitfall of this case: these little dividers. These help support 5 1/4-inch devices and make it easier to hold them in place while you're putting the screws in. But this adapter, which needs to use all of the available space to fit the 5 drives, doesn't fit. This issue also occurs with other 5-drive solutions like those from IcyDock, for example. Many other adapters, like this 3-in-2 model from IcyDock, have some little gaps where those dividers are, so it works. This is also the case with most 4-drive cages, it seems, but with those, we would now be down to just a max of 16 drives on the front, at least if you don't include the 2 on the inside. For a $300 case that's main selling point is the inclusion of bays, I really think there should have been a better solution for this. I get why the supports are helpful, but it really does limit some of the things you can do with this case, at least without getting a bit creative. Now, I want to be clear that I have very little experience working with metal, so I'm sure there are some easier solutions to remove these supports. So if so, let me know down in the comments. I first just tried bending them off with some pliers until they snapped off, which is kind of my go-to technique, but the metal was a bit too thick and the tabs were too short. So I also tried a rotary tool with a metal cutting wheel, but the wheel wasn't long enough and I wasn't able to get in at the right angle to try and cut it off. I even tried a jigsaw, which was probably a horrible idea, but it was too short anyway. I eventually went back to the rotary tool, but with a grinding stone instead of the cutting wheel. After like an hour and a half, I was finally able to grind down enough of those supports to try and squeeze one of those 5-bay adapters in. I had to force it a bit, but eventually I was able to get it in place. Once again, I'm sure many of you will tell me how much better and easier this could have been done, but because it had taken me so long to do, I decided to not spend the time to grind down the rest of the supports. But even if I had, well, you might have noticed another major flaw with this case, which is the giant power supply shroud. In a lot of cases, this would be great as it leaves a lot of cases. So, cases in PC case, but also cases in instance. It's not that funny, I guess. In a lot of cases, this would be great as it leaves a lot of room for storing cables and also provides room for that 3.5-inch drive cage. But it's so long that it basically prevents you from using anything in the bottom 3 bays, except for something like these included 1-drive adapters that are down in the bottom. I'm sure there are some adapters, like those for example, that would work down there, but once again, in a case that's main selling point is all of these bays, a quarter of them are much less usable than the rest. So even if I did spend a few more hours modifying this case, the best I could end up with is a total of 15 drives. As I said earlier, you could spring for adapters that don't require modifying those supports, but because of the power supply shroud issue, even if you went with adapters that support 4 drives and don't require you to grind down those supports, you'd still just end up with 12 drive bays. At that point, you might as well just wait around for the Jonsbo N5, which was recently covered by NAS Compares. It looks like that case is going to have 12 drive bays with a SATA backplane, which is pretty cool. But back to the AI Raider XL, what if we went a completely different route? What if we did what I mentioned earlier and just 3D printed some adapters instead? Now I know many of you are probably saying,
"Hey buddy, I don't have a 3D printer."
Well, in my opinion, it's a really good time to get one, because if you're watching this video when it first comes out, you might still be able to catch the Bambu Labs anniversary sale, where they have the A1 Mini on sale for just $200. If not, you can still get it for just $250, and with that you could easily print something like this drive bay adapter. I covered this 3D model briefly in a previous video, but it fits 4 3.5-inch drives in 3 5.25-inch bays, and uses these extremely minimal drive sled rail things. So with just the A1 Mini and a single spool of Black Pet G, I was easily able to print 3 of these cages, as well as the exact amount of rails for the number of drives. I'm just kidding, I printed a crap ton of them. This model also has room for a 120mm fan on the front, so I picked up a 5-pack of these fans from Arctic. After installing the fans on the cage, I put them in the case with no issues. Now, adding a bunch of drives in here wouldn't be very useful without an actual system to plug them into, so with a power supply, motherboard, HBA, and a healthy amount of off-camera magic, I had a simple makeshift system put together. I squeezed all of the drive rails onto a bunch of 4TB drives I have for testing stuff like this, and then started sliding them all into place. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that if you do decide to print these off, I had to scale these rails down to like 95 or 96% just to make sure that they slid into place a little bit easier, so just a heads up. After a bit more off-camera magic, I had the entire system put together and wired up. I also added the 2 remaining fans to the top of the case for a bit of exhaust. Overall, I'm mostly happy with how this turned out, and I think it's a pretty cool looking system. However, it didn't come without some issues. During the off-camera magic, I had an issue with the grommets falling off. I'm not sure if it's because they warped due to heat or something while this case was sitting out in storage, but it really doesn't matter, especially for a $300 case. Also, the rightmost plastic cover that covers up those grommets got in the way of even these smaller 3D printed brackets, which kind of defeats the purpose a bit. Also, for being such a large case, there really isn't a ton of room on the back for cable management, and trying to awkwardly slide on that massive back panel was not easy. After realizing that I wired the power and reset buttons backwards, I was able to get it to post, and started installing TrueNAS. Here though, I noticed that 2 drives were missing. I'm not entirely sure why, maybe it was some bad SATA cables or something, but I didn't really get a good chance to troubleshoot though, because after I installed TrueNAS, the system wouldn't post again. And this didn't seem to have anything to do with the drives, because I unplugged everything and still had the issue, so it seems like it's a fault with either the motherboard or the power supply. I didn't have any plans for this system other than to disassemble it after I finish this video, so I haven't dug that much deeper yet. If I happen to figure out what the issue was, I might edit it in, but once again, really doesn't matter for the purpose of this video. I was really hoping to make a goofy video where I could say that you could buy a printer, case, and 1 spool of filament, and have a case with 16 drive bays for less than the cost of an HL15 while also ending up with a 3D printer in the end. You would miss out on some of the nicer features like a hot swappable SATA backplane, but, well, you'd also end up with a 3D printer. But because of that stupid power supply shroud, even a fun gimmicky proposition like this isn't possible. I love the idea of this case, as it is a bit unique. At least, I haven't come across anything quite like it, outside of cases for like DVD duplicators and such. I really hope someone comes along and makes a more affordable version of something like this that's also more accommodating to various 5¼ inch adapters, since, well, that does seem to be the whole purpose of a case like this, at least in 2024. If it wasn't clear at this point, I do not recommend buying this case. And if you're really wanting to store a lot of drives in a similarly sized desktop case, maybe go watch this video here. In that video, I built 2 NAS systems with a lot of drives in desktop cases, including the Fractal Define 7 XL. That case, as well as the non-XL version and Meshify variants, are all much higher quality ATX cases that provide room for a lot of drives if that's specifically what you're looking for. I never intended for this video to be a recommendation for this very expensive case, but I was at least hoping to end up with a useful result. Sadly, that wasn't really the case here. Still, I had a lot of fun in the process, and I hope you did as well. If so, maybe like the video, maybe subscribe, and if you want to support the channel more, you can always become a raid member for as little as $1 a month, and that comes with some cool perks that you can check out down in the description. That's about it for this one though, so as always, thank you guys so much for watching, stay curious, and I really can't wait to see you in the next one.